natural bleach. And OPC also tends to trap the UV light from the sun's rays. So what's going to happen is the UV and the OPC combination in that plastic repair is simply going to bleach the red colouring out of the stone dust, and you end up with some ghastly horrible thing up there that looks like the very devil itself. This is about understanding the nature of our materials. Nowadays plastic repairs are very, very hastily frowned on. So, right, we're nearly at the end. I'm sorry this took so long, but really you're architects of your own demise because you've asked so many questions this afternoon, and I've really enjoyed.
Alan will be doing his tour of the models that we've got, which we're doing at some of our courses, the advanced roofing course and the complex roofing courses that Alan does. And we have dates for his course, and they're up somewhere on one of the notices, for a course. It's a week-long course.
Well, and I arrived at that by just simply putting in put Greek in and soft plain geometry, and this is what it turned out, so that's very nice.
Another kind of childhood dream was to build a timber structure, a tree house, and Nigel very kindly offered me the opportunity here about 10 years ago to build a tree house. So at any rate, having bought my own tiny bit of land, the first thing I did was build a birdhide, and I call it the pack flat birdhide. So this is the finished thing, and I kind of, it was a back of an envelope sketch. It's very small. I designed the detail of it literally sitting on a toolbox on the platform and using a tape measure above my head and how far my knees stuck out. And so the kind of irregular shape is where, if you think of it as a side profile of me sitting down and viewing the river, it's that small. Because this, actually, I nearly broke my neck on this one. I built the platform, semi-built it in my workshop, and it fitted on the roof rack of the car. I deliberately left the inside hollow because it was too heavy for me. The whole thing has been built by one person and it's heavy. So this is about my 6th attempt on the ladder, nearly landing up in the river. At one point it put round one of the poles and trapped me to the pole. Imagine it like a clamp, and there was nobody else around to help. Once I got it on top, then I could slide it over.
I've got a background in construction management, but I've only been in post at Westonbirt for about 3 months. So timber framing is a kind of new world to me. So I don't know everything. I don't profess to be an expert, so be kind. So a little bit about the Arboretum. Robert Holford was a Victorian entrepreneur who was also a plant collector and a visionary. He created Westonbirt in the 19th century, and it's one of the world's finest collection of trees. The site itself is about 600 acres, and it's a historic Grade 1 registered park and garden, with approximately 15,222 specimens and 1,777 species of tree. Next one, please. So we've got a bit of a history of creating quite beautiful timber frame structures on site. Many of you will be familiar with the Great Oak Hall. This build started in 1999. The very lovely Nigel was part of that build. He handled every single piece of timber that has gone into that building. Is that right?
Went across my sawmill, yes. And soon after we thought, really good idea to share this sort of practice of how to build these things. And I think something like the Carpenter's Fellowship sort of came out of this and a few other projects. So we have a history of, as in we, as a fellowship, have a history with Westonbirt. So it's sort of, well, they're part of the family, if you like, if you want to be that romantic. And I'm sure that somebody in the future...
As part of the Westonbirt project, which was Heritage Lottery funded, we created the Tree Management Centre and Mess building. These buildings look quite different to the other timber frames you've got on site. They're more industrial looking, but no less beautiful, and really still in keeping with the Grade 1 listed landscape. So here you can see the Tree Management Centre under construction. It's a vast structure and a really important building for us. Our tree team do a fantastic job of looking after our renowned collection, and they really needed a space to be able to keep all their tools that enable them to continue their work. So that's it from the outside, and in the background you can just see the Mess building. So you And again, as part of both of these buildings, we wanted people to have the opportunity to be involved. So at the mess building, we had our estate volunteers get stuck in. They had a really good go at the cladding, both inside and outside the building. And then as part of the tree management centre, and the next slide, you can see that we ran some hewing courses and out in the downs, created a bit of a spectacle and got everybody talking about what can be done with timber. So now we're entering our next phase of projects, and partly what I've been brought in to do is manage Westonbirt Woodworks. So here is the site. It used to be the plant centre, and it's currently situated just beneath our new treetop walkway. So it's got a hugely prominent position on site. What we're really good at doing is telling the story of going out to collect the seeds, the propagation, the planting of the tree, and the life of the tree. But what we've not been quite so good at is telling the story about timber, how valuable it is, and what can be done with it. So this is almost like a showcasing of all the wonderful stuff you can do with timber. It's also in line with the Forestry Commission's real push to look at sustainably British sourced timber, and also the centenary of the FC, which is next year. So the site at the moment is just about to be leased by a chap called Paul Hayden, who some of you may or may not know. He runs amazing Windsor chair making courses on site, and he's going to take over this particular complex of Victorian agricultural buildings to run the wood centre. So my role is to help build some of the buildings that we're going to have put in place and restore other elements of the building. So we're going to have a sawmill shelter for our brand new sawmill, which has just arrived from Poland into the UK. It's a Truckmet 1200. That doesn't mean anything to me, but I'm told it's very good. And that's going to be situated in our new sawmill shelter. There's then going to be a drying store, which is going to store all of the mill timber. And then the next phase of work will be a demonstration area, which is looking at conserving the cattle barn that we've got there, putting a roof on it, and creating a real hub for heritage craft and activity to enable lots of different people. I'll be mooching around this evening, as for Nigel. So if it's something you think you might be interested in contributing to, we'll be able to take your names and sort of...
Special apprentices or specially accredited trainees with this model in front of them, because this, as I said, is part of the family of the Carpenters Fellowship as far as we're concerned. So all the new trainees are trained with that, are photographed with that in front of them. So that's, yeah, it's a special relationship. So thank you for inviting us to be involved in these other projects as well.
So, the Sylva Foundation. So let me start off. We're a small environmental charity, but we do work on a national level. Our mission is to help trees and people grow together. We work across Britain, and we are active under 4 main programmes. Our first programme is science. And I don't know if people have heard of the British Woodlands 2017 survey. We've just completed the British Woodlands 2018 survey. And the main part of that is for us to understand what motivates woodland owners. And it's important because about 3/4 of our woodlands are owned by private individuals. We also have a programme called Education. And our main educational programme is forest schools. The next one, the education, is forest schools. Our education manager again works on a national level with that, and we also deliver forest schools on our land. So we have schools coming in, and we have young children coming in and doing whittling and things on site. Also an education, you may have heard of the One Oak project that my boss Gabriel Henry did. Fantastic project we did in education. We felled a most beautiful 222-year-old oak tree in the grounds of Blenheim Palace, which was kindly donated by the Duke of Marlborough. And we stood there in the pouring rain and we felled it, and that became one of the most studied trees apparently in Europe. We did it as an education course. We went into schools to sort of teach children what had happened since that tree had grown from an acorn. I also went up to Scotland to the National Botanic Gardens up there, and we did exhibitions. So we have a very strong educational programme. We've also just done a Charterford trees programme where we were commissioned by the Woodland Trust to carve 40 trees, and they are now upright and placed up and down the UK, and we've got one on our site to celebrate the. So as you can see, even so far, the IT investment for Sylva is big. A lot of what we do in the sort of woodland area is through IT. And then our last programme, which is where the sort of House of Wessex fits, is a wood, and we have a wood centre. And it's in our woods. We've only had it up and running about 3 years now, but we have 14 small businesses in the wood centre. We have a small mobile sawmill to a master boat builder. We also have furniture makers. That's called a velo chair, and that was made by a student from Wycott Wood College.
Well, I used to teach there.
So that's just been done, and then the last one is courses. We hold courses there. We're also having an education centre being built, which started last week, where we are now starting to run courses on a much bigger scale. Clearly it's income generating. So that's where we came about. The sort of House of Wessex project fits under our wood programme and obviously under our education. Exciting. And so these are the drawings. The design has changed slightly, not much, but the design's changed. So these are Tim's drawings that we've taken on after discussions with the Institute of Archaeology and the continuing Department of Archaeology and the people we've met to kind of tell us what we think it might have looked like. And there's another one, yeah. Okay. So the building, we've said it was high status, we've said how big it is. The wood has been kindly donated by Blenheim Palace again. We have a very good relationship with them. Probably predominantly oak, but Tim was saying earlier it could also be a mix of species.
Excellent. Okay, well basically I'm here to talk about CF Projects. CF Projects is the wing of the CF that deals with the projects we have in hand. Who was here at St Fagans last year? A couple of hands go up. Adam Miller, who I can only describe as a genius with round timber scribing. Jimmy Simon, Rob over there. Great to see you here tonight. You guys understand what it's about when you get involved in a CF project. Come to site, the great buzz of producing one of these buildings. And by the way, guys who are at St Fagans, there's a big opening in October, and I'll make sure to let you know. And
when in October?
I can't remember the exact date. Well, I know you're in the USA, Adam. So
no, I'm not flying home until.
We'll see if we can change a date to suit you.
Talk about two projects, recent vintages. The first one is this bridge that I've been doing some research on recently. It's at the Goodnow Lamps and Knife Factory in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. The factory was built between 1850 and 1855, and this bridge is original to the rest of the factory. As you can see, it's a very unique bridge that's never actually been researched extensively before. It's both curved and plan, so it runs at it has about 46-foot 8-inch radius at the inner lower chord, and it's also inclined. It rises about 10 feet over its length. You can go to the next slide. Here's the interior view of the bridge. It's a town lattice truss bridge, which is if you're not familiar with it, is probably the only kind of truss you can bend around a curve. You can see here, this is sort of a transitional period in carpentry in the United States, where it was where this was all nailed together. There's no real joinery in this, but it uses the town lattice truss, which is very common. You can see it has all the lattices are all 1x4-inch lattices. They're very light. This is about six feet wide, 6 to 7 feet wide, 6 to 7 feet tall. It's about 70 feet span at this point. let's have the next slide. So you can see the curve there. You can also see how it hits the building on the uphill side at a weird angle. Now this is a knife factory. So in building 5, where we're standing, was where all the knives were finished, and then for almost 160 some odd years, from 1850 some odd to about 2014, this was an active factory, and so every day workers were pushing carts full of loaded, sharpened knives up through this bridge to the shipping department up here on the 3rd floor, where they were then packed and then sent down on a rope-operated elevator to the loading dock. It's about like 12, 13 feet of clearance underneath here, and it's actually a sign that says how much clearance. But let's have the next slide. Again, here's a shot inside. You can see that there are a few struts. There's currently 2 piers, and there's some struts, some hanger rods coming from the struts, but it's kind of inconsistent on that front. Another slide. So now we got a series of various etchings and such from different periods of the factory, all showing the curved covered bridge here. Here's the falls. It's the Sylvan Falls. It's one of the best water power sites in Massachusetts. About a 300 horsepower dam. And they had a right to a second one that they never built down there. Next slide. Here's another one, clearly engraved by somebody who was using somebody else's notes to draw this etching. This one is probably from about 1890 to 1900. Now you can see here, it's interesting, in the pictures I showed you, there are two piers in the current bridge. This shows 4, and there were originally 3 piers. Now this, and you can see here, over here, the bridge becomes a nice square into the gable end. Now let's go another slide ahead. Here you can see the bridge here in this picture. I think it's an aerial photo from about 1950. You can see it hits the wall at a really weird angle, because this whole cross gable addition to the building was added on around 1900. And let's have another slide. And you can see, so here the bridge used to end over here at this gable end of this building here, behind this pilaster about 15 feet back. And then they decided they wanted this nice addition. So they put the addition in and kept the bridge, but chopped about half of it off. There used to be another pier right here. And of course that meant that they had to make the bridge steeper, because it was still getting the same amount of rise. And so what they ended up doing, all those the details for cutting that whole model, including this St. Andrew's cross they've laid into the roof plane there, which is removable. Next, please. So after learning these sorts of techniques, I wanted to both not forget them and practice them more in working curves, because I really like working in curves. And so I started working out of some old out of the Bion Frere old French carpentry manual that was published right around the turn of the century in 1900 or so. And I worked on a series of models that were in there, including this. This is the first little Capucine I built, which is just these actually, I think, might be symmetrical curved hip rafters. So the next one, that was only about 8 inches wide. Here's a slightly more complex one that has the similar curved hip rafters, but with some pincer links built in. And then the next one. There's a little model guitar that I built, which is 12 inches wide on its drawing. And these three models, this is like the cover photos of this on the Timber Framing 121, I think, the journal. So let's see the next shot.
Are these all the elevation drawings?
Yeah, those are the I think to go to the next shot. That gives the draw. This is a picture of the drawing, scan of the drawing. So when I was doing these, I was working on work of radically different scales. So. It's 3 feet over through the light on the other side there, but okay. Next slide. So here's another one. I made this up early last year for a class I taught at Hartwood last fall, building this Capucine, which has asymmetric curved hip rafters. So each one, and then this model is all laid out with all the softening lines drawn on it for clarity, because it's a teaching model. But it's asymmetric curved hip rafters, so the pitch in the back. The pitch of the backing, the angle of the backing is changing constantly as you go up and down, and it's different on both sides of the hip. So but the hips are mirror image of each other. So in the class, I have the students solve for both hips, even though they're mirror images for practice. And then we also, after successfully completing that part, I gave them this task where we built in, where we did this this passing St. Andrew's cross that passes up and over the hips with a half lap joint in the middle there.
But using history as a reference point, so I'm going to do a snapshot tour right back to the Magna Carta, so it links tradition with modern practice. But just very briefly, for those who didn't attend my short talk last night, I gave a quick one on this guitar I made, which I call an acoustic guitar, and it relies on electronics really, on a sophisticated system of individual pickups on each string, and I can translate that through a guitar synthesizer and create piano sounds, flute, cello, electric organ and normal guitar. And it's made out of plywood, but also 400-year-old black walnut from Sylvan Park in London that a friend from the Forest of Avon cooperative that Nigel has been involved with, he gave me. So it's nice to combine old and new materials and old and new methods. So in passing, I thought I'd mention that. I'm also very rooted in tradition. Tradition is a springboard. I just bought this from, I said I'd promote him and I've forgotten his name. He's the guy on the corner.
Is it new?
New.
Bad.
No, of course it isn't.
No,
it's
I
old.
don't think so. But it
No, it was made in the 12th century. Well, I'm in the right place, aren't I? It's made out of English oak, it's bespoke, and it's a sliding bevel, and of course used for roofing, and I could have used it on my bird hide. And talking about pack flat, that Jacobean gate leg table was probably the first flat pack design, so IKEA, you know, don't think you're
That's a good pointer now, Jez. If
it is.
Right up, you'll be fine.
If you don't pay attention. What I've done here is, this is a real snapshot because the focus of my talk is on the post-British craft revival of the 70s, of which I was lucky enough to be involved with. I was there at the scene of the crime, so I can report directly the people and the ideas and the innovations in the wake of which we have this incredible explosion of workshops and innovation, which probably makes us world leaders alongside our American friends. We've got the medieval dugout chest. A lot of furniture then was movable because of the insecurity of being plundered and robbed by neighbouring tribes.
That's a real thing? That's a real thing?
What, that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a log.
Yeah, cut out of a log. I mean, this is early 12th century furniture made of oak. This is a linen fold panel that was originally made in stone, and a lot of the woodworking crafts, as you know, have come from stone and church building crafts, masonry. But Gordon Russell, I think, is undervalued. He used machines, and he was responsible. He was involved in aircraft design and Murphy radios during the Second World War, and he also made utility furniture, which I think is a valuable part of English history, furniture history. And then this is Freddie Baird, who was the kind of punk furniture maker. He won an award in the 70s, and there was a celebration at the Savoy Hotel after his one-man exhibition. He turned up and the bouncers kicked him out because he was dressed like a punk rocker. And he said quietly, he said, well, actually it's in honour of my work or whatever. Oh, sorry, and they let him in.
One of Nigel's instructions to me was, you know, consider small timbers, okay? Now, when you get time, come and look in here, but this is the cover of a book by, it's a modern facsimile, Sebastiano Serlio, Italian. Serlio's problem was a carpenter was asked to frame the joists to hold an upper floor in a building. But, like Nigel, they said, we haven't got any timber that will span this distance. So say it was a 12-foot square, they'd only got 10-foot timber. How you can frame the joists for an upper floor using less than adequate length timber. So I knew that. I knew about that book, and so I had it in my mind. And it generated these, what I call Catherine wheel timbers up here, which are not the full length they could be. You know, this one could rise until it hits the other rafter and so on. So they are slightly shorter than expected timbers. And similarly, the boarding in the walls here, none of those timbers would give us full height cladding from the bottom of the sill up to the wall plate. So these are all small or undersized timbers. The angle of the roof, okay?